Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Ra. Ra is a high skill god focusing on skill shots and lacks any movement abilities, so he's a god who's very risky, but if you take the time to learn him, he can be heavily impactful every single match. Build wise, Ra loves damage, but is so risky you almost always want at least one defense item. This usually being Breastplate of Valor since it gives him a good mix of defense and CDR, although Mantle of Discord may see a return with its recent buff. Otherwise though, it's all in on the damage, and Ra actually does so much he can afford one defense item and unironically still one-shot people at full build. Relics wise, come on now, it's speeds first and then ages second. Although he's definitely a god where you want to get Shell upgraded later into Phantom Shell against gods like Yamoja, Kabrakan, and Odin who have walls. Shard wise, Claw Shard is the way to go for some nasty burst on things like your ultimate and first ability. Recipe wise, Bountiful Bow is awesome when teamed with Ra's first ability, but for me Party Punch fits Ra's bursty playstyle better, it's just up to personal preference. Let's quickly touch on how Ra is supposed to live by talking about his passive. For every successful ability cast, Ra will gain a stack of his passive, which will grant him % bonus movement speed. The stacks last for 15 seconds, and applying a new stack refreshes the duration, but does not extend it. And that's it. If there was ever a good reason to max out on CDR on a character, it's this right here. You need this passive on full at all times. Which, sure, is hard to do in the early game, but you really do want it stacked at all times. Keep that 15-second timer in mind though. For optimal mana usage, you want to try and time your abilities with the timer here, to ensure maximum efficiency. Of course, mainly to survive potential ganks. But also one thing that gets unappreciated on Ra is his ability to zip around the map for rotations. Also bringing back the idea of Party Punch. Ra has a very easy time getting around to jungle camps with his passive, to assist in jungle camp clears from a safe distance, namely thanks to his first ability. Ra fires a slow-moving long-range beam, this ability passing through all walls and enemies. And yep, that's the ability. But like with Scylla's second ability, this is Ra's damage in his core kit. It's your main wave clear during the laning phase, your method of poke during fights, and a good third of your overall damage in combos. The key here is aiming it. It's a weird ability to hit consistently. Not on waves, obviously, but there's an art form to consistently hitting Ra's first ability, and boy are you rewarded heavily for it, because this ability does some unreal damage. One way to try and utilize this ability against gods, particularly in fights, is simply using it over walls. This makes the ability far more difficult to predict and gives you a far better chance of hitting it. It requires good positioning from you as the Ra, as obviously, you want to be as far back as humanly possible on this god to remain safe. And also have good predictions on essentially letting your enemies walk into this ability for you when they inevitably try to dodge it. Don't forget about the cooldown too though. It has a low cooldown on base, but once you get some CDR online, with the Chronos Pendant especially, this ability becomes very worth just spamming out at maximum range. Even though it is a vital ability, once you get that cooldown reduction online, shoot it out as often as possible to get a better feel for how you want to aim the ability. That's all that needs to be said really, just get very good at this ability, and you've already won half the battle playing Ra. Luckily, Ra's second ability is much easier to hit. Ra winds up and slows all enemies around himself, enemies looking at Ra being slowed for more, while he cleanses slows on himself and becomes slow immune for 0.6 seconds. After 2 seconds, Ra damages as well as slows one final time any enemies inside the AoE, and will blind all enemies who are directly looking at Ra. Which is, yes, if you didn't already know, the thing I'm trying to avoid every time I fight Ra-bot in one of these videos. It seems super complex, right? Nah, I'm only joking, this is exceptionally simple. It's a great ability just to throw out to keep your passive up, in case you wanted to keep your more important abilities up while still keeping your passive up. On that note, of course, this is your only self-heal ability, and it's slow. Yeah, I'm sure you're starting to see why Ra isn't exactly safe. Luckily, he listened to the local health and safety officials and got himself a high visibility jacket in the form of that blind though. Enemies have to turn away or else their eyes will hurt. Okay, it's far from a sure thing for self-heal, but at least Ra is the only god in the game who hurts his enemies in real life. So it's your only chance of escape, which of course is far from guaranteed, but again nice and simple here. You get jumped on, you pop your 2. You can also use this slow aggressively though in one-on-one situations or when your jungler is ganking your lane opponent. Obviously, like I just mentioned, this is Ra's only self-heal, so use it aggressively only when you know it's safe to do so. But of course, it opens you up to hitting your first ability basically for free. But luckily, if you get punished for doing this, you can rely on your third ability for a final line of defense. Ra deploys an AoE which will last for 6 seconds, and will heal all allies and damage enemies inside of it for every second, and this ability can be cast over walls too. Additionally, allies inside the AoE, including Ra himself, will be granted flat power and protections at all times in the AoE. So this is an absolutely absurd ability, one of the best non-ultimate abilities in the game, easily. One problem though, it's not moving, it just kinda sits there, so most of the time, you're not able to make use of all 6 seconds. That's fine, since it's your go-to brawling tool is Ra. Not late game, obviously. No brawling is Ra late game. You're either hitting your abilities at maximum range or dying, but in the early and mid game, you can actually use this ability and its numerous buffs as well as the heal as a trade tool against your lane opponent. You can also sometimes use it for zoning or poke, just throwing it out there for a tick or 2 of damage and then creating an area where the enemy god won't want to go while they're running away. But as I just implied, you really only want to do this when you have a very clear advantage on whoever you're placing it on. For the most part, 99% of the time, you'll be placing this on top of yourself or whichever ally needs it most during a fight. Don't forget about just slapping on top of an ally when they get dove or go for engage though. Getting that power and protections on yourself is great, but buffing multiple allies as they fight can completely swing the fight. But if you really want an ability that'll swing a fight, check out Ra's ultimate. Ra becomes CC immune and winds up, while rooting himself in place, then deals damage in an absolutely massive AoE range, but the width of the AoE is rather small. The ability deals extremely high base damage, but also deals 5% of the target's current health as true damage. And that's all the ability is, a hard to hit, extremely long range, and insanely powerful blast. If you thought getting good at hitting Ra's first ability was hard, this snipe is legendarily hard to hit, and it's always a hype moment when it hits an important target, because it easily swipes away half their health in one go, if not more. Two less interesting but just as important factors are that for one, Ra goes CC immune, and even though he roots himself in place, it's still a great option to avoid CC that's about to hit you. It's an easy out to things like Ares ultimate, Athena's dash taunt, and so on. And it's viable to use it this way thanks to the base cooldown of this ability, starting at an already low 80 seconds but goes all the way down to 60 seconds, meaning that at full CDR, you're looking at a mere 36 second cooldown. That also means you can kinda use it like a regular ability sometimes. Obviously don't just throw it out with the zero reason, but it's pretty common for instance just to see Ra's ult the wave at exceptional range before backing, so that they can back before their lane opponent. Then, once they come back to lane, the ult is usually already almost back up. It's great for objective secure as well, because obviously, lots of damage here, but it's even better than most mage secures. Ra can do it from very, very far away. And once you're later on in the match, you can secure objectives with the ultimate and then take a fight almost immediately afterwards. Since unlike most mage ults, your ult is back up in time for your team just to heal up a little bit and then go for a fight with this ultimate ready. Then comes the actual most important thing about the ability, actually hitting it. The wind up mixed with Ra rooting himself in place makes it properly hard to hit, however you have to get very good at hitting it. It really is all about making hard reads and predictions, a lot like his first ability in that regard. You really can't just sit around waiting for CC to hit an important target. You always want to be looking for a good opportunity to ult and just go for it during a fight. The low cooldown, of course, making up for the fact that you might just miss it. When you're teamed with someone like Cerberus, Athena, Ares, or Xing Qin, who pool enemies together for your ultimate, in that case you do just want to hold off on ulting in case those abilities catch someone important. The best thing you can do while learning Ra is just practice this snipe, like, a lot. Let's do that ourselves with some combos with Ra. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1, and ult as soon as the 1 is about to hit. For ability leveling, you are 3 at level 1, and remember to stay in it for the bonus stats. Then, you're 1 at level 2, and you're 2 at level 3. From there you max your 1, your 3, then your 2, leveling the ultimate whenever you can. Ra is a wild god. He's received very few major changes over his 11-year tenure in SMITE, but the game plan is still the same as it ever was, and the general consensus around the character is the same too. If you're very good at Ra, that is to say both good in terms of your positioning and your mechanical skill, you can play him every single match and perform well. But if you're not good at him, just don't touch this character with a 10-foot pole. Because Ra's strengths are actually very well defined. He has some of the highest bursts in the game, at some of the longest ranges in the game, with the dominant laning phase on top. And all you have to do is hit your shots and not die. Which, frankly, are both difficult tasks as Ra's, especially considering how those two concepts interconnect. To not die, you need to play very far back, and by playing very far back, your abilities become harder to hit. It's tempting just to walk up because your abilities are so hard to hit. But you can't. You have to get good at playing from way, way back and still landing your abilities. But when you do master him, there's really no stopping you. You can play Ra every single game and have a major impact. Although the caveat here is that your team definitely needs to pull their weight. Not even when it just comes to peeling for you or setting up for you, more like if you're the only player who's, relevant on your team, the enemy team has free rein just to ignore your other team members and just run at you. And no amount of good positioning can really help when the enemy team has zero fear of the rest of your team. Still though, Ra is a legendary god and creates some of the most hype moments of the match with insane long distance snipes and perfectly predicted ones over the wall. And everyone appreciates and respects a good Ra. He's the kind of god when you see someone doing well on him you think, damn, that guy is good. So if a god who tests you mechanically and tests your game sense every moment of every match is what you're looking for, Ra's the only mage for you. That's all I have on Ra for now. Thanks for watching.